We begin this hour with breaking news and a busy Saturday for President Biden on the world stage. Right now, the president is in a bilateral meeting with France's Emmanuel Macron following a procession that the two leaders participated in on the Champs-Elysees earlier this morning. Biden and Macron are expected to deliver remarks later this morning. This is all part of the president's trip to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Allied invasion of Normandy in World War II. Throughout the visit, the president has emphasized the threat to dictators that they pose to our democracy, not just here at home, but also abroad. And those threats are as urgent as they were 80 years ago. Joining us now to discuss it all is staff writer for The Atlantic and MSNBC contributor McKay Coppins and former Homeland Security and Counterterrorism advisor to Vice President Mike Pence, Olivia Troye. Welcome to you both.
Welcome, everybody. Olivia, this was quite a week for President Biden to stand on the global stage in a way that he did to talk about the urgency of this moment in democracy and relating it back to history. What was your take on what the president had to say, and how do you think it resonated, not just with our European allies, but here at home?
Olivia, you might be a statesman
and a leader.
There we go.
I think he did an excellent job of being a statesman and a leader on the world stage. I think it was critical to show that face to the world and also to Americans. And I think, Michael, that what resonated with me was he did have sort of that Reagan-esque quality to him, and he did deliver that in his speech. And I thought it was important to talk about, the people that have served in the military, the lives that have been given for freedom, and that is really what's at stake here. I saw some criticism on Fox or other channels where they're like, why is he attacking Trump in this moment? He never mentioned Trump, right? He never mentioned him by name, I don't believe. But I think what he needed to say was that this is a bigger choice than just each and every one of us. It's a choice about what do we want our future to be as a country, and let's honor those lives that served for this country.
Olivia, I mean, the words of President Biden were so poignant and I thought spot on. Let's play a little bit of what he talked about when it comes to hardships of American democracy. This is the president in Normandy, France on Friday for the control room. It's E3.
We talk about democracy, American democracy. We often talk about the ideals of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. What we don't talk about is how hard it is, how many ways we're asked to walk away, how many instincts are to walk away. The most natural instinct is to walk away, to be selfish, to force our will upon others, to seize power, never give up. American democracy asks the hardest of things, to believe that we're part of something bigger than ourselves.
I mean, does anybody think Donald Trump could have given that speech? Alicia, I don't know.
It's a rhetorical question, correct, Simone? I mean, and McKay, it speaks to all of the reporting that you've been doing, which is it is impossible to watch President Biden on the world stage without doing a compare-contrast, not just us, people who show up on cable news, but as an American watching at home and certainly as an ally watching abroad.
Yeah, the themes that Biden is sounding in these speeches and throughout these events commemorating D-Day are very familiar themes from past administrations, frankly, in both parties, right? To Olivia's point, they sound in some ways like Ronald Reagan, like George H.W. Bush, even like George W. Bush, who was not a very popular president abroad. On certain things, there has been a bipartisan consensus in this country for a long time. One of those things is the importance of the transatlantic relationship and the fact that it is rooted in Western democratic values, a belief that America is supposed to align with other democracies and that alliance is a safeguard for the rest of the world. And what's interesting is that speech that Biden gave would have been completely uncontroversial, even unmemorable, just a few short years ago. Now it is like right in the middle of a massive domestic political debate about what role America should play in the world and what it owes to its allies. And so that compare and contrast is really stark this year.
Well, you touch on that, McKay, actually, in a great observation for The Atlantic. What Europe fears, the irony of Europe's obsession with the upcoming election, is that the people who will decide its outcome aren't thinking about Europe much at all. In part, that's because many Americans haven't seen the need for NATO in their lifetime, despite the fact that the September 11th terrorist attacks were the only time Article 5 has been invoked. You touch on a very important point about disconnection. And it actually, and ironically, it's something that George Bush 43 warned about on the heels of 9/11. We cannot forget this moment. We feel good. We are unified now. We understand we're standing in defense of our values, and we're prepared to prosecute the case against terrorism. But all of that is dissipated. That connection to those institutions that hold all of this together. And I think Biden being there and saying what he said was important. But you point up the fact that there's still this tension, this disconnect that needs to be reconciled between us and Europe, between our role in the world and the rest of the world, and how we as Americans look at these institutions.
So I was traveling throughout Europe this spring doing reporting, talking to European officials, diplomats, and the thing that kept coming up was this real sense of uncertainty about what America is anymore, right? Because for 75 years, since World War II, Europe, even when they disagreed with the people that we elected, even when they really didn't like certain administrations, they trusted in America to be a reliable ally, right? They were, that America was the linchpin to the NATO alliance, that it was going to be a generally responsible member of the global community, right? And that first Trump term really did damage to America's reputation and to the trust that America could be relied upon. And again, I would kind of hear these European officials sort of ask me, like, what does it mean that Donald Trump is currently leading in the polls in your country? You know, like how many?
What's wrong with y'all?
Well, because they fondly remember the U.S. that stormed the beaches of Normandy, that liberated Europe. Like that is the Europe that the America that a lot of Europeans still remember, and they're wondering how many Americans still fondly remember that version of the U.S.
Right, and so to crystallize that point, Olivia, I want you to take a listen to this ad that Liz Cheney's PAC put out. It's called Our Great Task. Take a listen.
One's country is worth dying for, and democracy is worth dying for because it's the most deeply honorable form of government ever devised by man. All of you loved liberty. All of you were willing to fight tyranny, and you knew the people of your countries were behind you.
Today we give thanks for all that was gained on the beaches of Normandy. We remember what was lost with respect, admiration, and love. This freedom and these hopes are what the heroes of D-Day fought and died for.
America deserves a president as good and steadfast as our nation, a president of character, driven by a noble purpose, one who honors the sacrifices of our troops, not a man consumed by spite, revenge, and self-pity.
You don't need to say the name, Olivia, to know who it is that Liz Cheney is talking about there.
Yeah, you don't. And look, it reminds me of Trump just saying, you know, that these people were losers. And every time I think about that a president of the United States would ever say that, my stomach turns. And, you know, watching that ad, I kept thinking about my time during the Trump administration working in national security. And I think what lacked among some of the inner circle, including with Trump himself, was a greater purpose of service. I don't think that any of these people, this inner circle I'm talking about and his enablers and him, understood a greater calling, understood something that you belong to that is bigger than yourself and bigger than the selfishness of what some of these people exhibited, because most of them never did serve. They don't understand the military service. They don't understand the intelligence community. They don't understand public service. And so I think that is important to remind ourselves of what the President of the United States stands for and what they represent and what they'll eventually do. And like a reminder, we will likely pull out of NATO because those discussions were had during the Trump administration. And the reason that the world is concerned about what's about to happen should he return to office is because I was in those meetings when we were having serious discussions with foreign countries where the narrative would change on a daily basis, where the foreign partner would be sitting there. I thought we agreed to this, and then it would change. We did this on Venezuela. I'm telling you this because I covered Latin America for Vice President Pence. I covered Africa for Vice President Pence. I sat in these discussions where there would be a commitment made, and then they would pull the rug out from under him. That's not how you do diplomacy. That's not how you do these diplomatic relations that are so critical and so challenging.
I mean, Olivia, people at home may not appreciate fully what you are saying, because literally all diplomacy is a bunch of people saying, I'm going to do this, you're going to do that, and we come to an agreement. It is all about relationship and people keeping their word. That is it. And not even just the idea, the fact. We often talk about it, but the choice, as Alicia noted, the stark choice that is before the American people, it couldn't have been made more clear today, this week, frankly, from what we saw from President Biden juxtaposed with the person who is the Republican nominee. I mean, the NATO was 80 years ago when D-Day happened. NATO wasn't established, right? It was the Allied troops that came together. The world came together, took the beaches of Normandy, and it was that time in Normandy that turned the tide to end World War II. It led to the establishment of NATO years later. It led to the establishment of the UN. And we are in an eerily similar moment. The president talked about linking D-Day to what's happening in Ukraine and the fight right now. I want to play that for you and have you guys talk on the other side.
The struggle between a dictatorship and freedom is unending. Here in Europe, we see one stark example. Ukraine has been invaded by a tyrant bent on domination. Ukrainians are fighting with extraordinary courage, suffering great losses, but never backing down. The United States and NATO and a coalition of more than 50 countries standing strong with Ukraine. We will not walk away.
McKay, it sounds to me like the president is standing in front of the world, trying to convincing people, trying to make everyone feel okay that as long as I'm here, we will be standing with Ukraine. But as the Time article said, you know, about a week ago about American presidents, they must earn their mandate, and we don't know if Joe Biden will earn his.
Yeah, that's right. And again, going throughout Europe and talking to these European officials, the thing I heard again and again was, look, the Biden administration has been great, right? They are doing everything they can to say the right things. They're trying to reassure allies who were rattled during Trump's administration. But at the end of the day, the Biden administration can only do so much. And I even spoke to U.S. officials here in Washington in the Biden administration who said, look, we have our ambassadors out there trying to reassure allies. They've got their talking points. But these people in Europe are smart, right? They know that the promises that Joe Biden is making only go so far. And, you know, because the outcome of the election is going to determine the future of America's approach to alliances.
As Donald Trump awaits sentencing in New York, he's openly musing about the possibility of prosecuting political opponents if he's reelected. Here's how he responded when a reporter in Arizona asked him about jailing his rivals.
The world is different now. They're doing things that were never done. They're doing what they do in third world countries. The only reason they brought the case is because I ran for election. It could have been brought 7 years ago. There would have been nothing to say, but nobody wanted to bring it because there is no case. There was no crime. So when you ask me the question, would we do it? I'll talk to you in about 3 years from now.
So here's a quick fact check, folks. Trump was charged in New York because the evidence led to prosecutors to believe that he committed a serious crime. Not because he was running for president, not because he was running for office. And they couldn't bring the case 7 years ago because he was the president of the United States at the time. Now, more important is the desire for retribution. That's the thing. And how it underscores so much of Trump's attacks on our institutions. That has become a central pillar of his 2024 campaign. Joining us now, MSNBC legal analyst and former prosecutor Charles Coleman, and Lawfare's legal fellow and courts correspondent Anna Bower. Welcome to you both. I know, right?
Yeah.
That's just...
Charles, you're a former prosecutor. Do you think prosecutors should be concerned that if Donald Trump wins election, that he will go after them? Do you think they should take him at his word?
Simone, I think that not only should prosecutors be concerned, but I think the entire electorate and by larger measure, the entire American people should be concerned. I think Donald Trump has shown that he is someone who's, when he says he's going to do something, regardless of how ridiculous it is, he's going to do it. And particularly if you look at the judiciary and Dobbs and everything else that occurred during his administration, we have the evidence that this is someone who intends to enact whatever it is he has to in order to keep his word in that regard. So this is something that, even as ridiculous as it sounds, should cause for extreme amounts of concern. As I listened to him during that voiceover just a moment ago, I thought to myself, Donald Trump ran for president because they brought the charges. It wasn't that they brought the charges because Donald Trump ran for president. And I think that he will make and do and construct any maneuvers necessary in order to enact his retribution, as he says, on the judiciary for whatever it is he feels that they have unjustly done to him as persecution rather than prosecution.
And here's the thing, Anna, it is not just Trump, it is his cronies. Take a listen to what Miller and Bannon had to say.
Unless Republicans unshackle themselves from their self-imposed restraints and are as ruthless in fighting to save America as the Democrats are in fighting to destroy America. Every facet of Republican Party politics and power has to be used right now to go toe-to-toe with Marxism and beat these communists.
All of this is about one thing. This is about shutting down the MAGA movement, shutting down grassroots conservatives, shutting down President Trump. There's not a prison built or a jail built that will ever shut me up. All victory to MAGA.
All victory to MAGA. And I'm sorry, it is real early in the morning to have to hear from those two. So my apologies to folks at home, but I do think it is important to hear the way they're talking about this. And the other thing that strikes me, Anna, is that it used to sort of be vague threats of prosecution. About a year ago, you had the former president saying that he would go after President Biden. You now have him adding by name Hillary Clinton to that list, adding Alvin Bragg to that list. The threat is becoming increasingly specific.
It is becoming increasingly specific, and it's really chilling rhetoric to hear. You know, you hear this, and it undermines the rule of law, this rhetoric. But I think what's important, too, is that Trump, if he is elected, what's going to matter is who the people are around him. So people like maybe Steve Bannon. And he knows from his previous administration that if he selects people who push back against him, who are going to be willing to stop him, he's not going to get what he wants. And so I think this time around, one of the things that's going to be very different as there are these promises of retribution being made is that Trump is going to be thinking about who it is that he's going to be putting in his potential administration. And he's this time around, I think, going to be much less willing to put people in power who are going to say no.
Charles, here's my thing with all of this. The fact that we still talk about this almost as if it's this universe of MAGA and Trump, and then there's the Democrats trying to battle them. But at the core of it is a political party and institutions that support that party, Heritage, for example, that are hell-bent on one thing: retribution, payback. You've got the New York Times noting by Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman and Charlie Savage the intensity of anger and open desire for using the criminal justice system against Democrats after the verdict surpasses anything seen before in Trump's tumultuous years in national politics. What is different now is the range of Republicans who are saying retaliation is necessary and who are no longer cloaking their intent with euphemism. Couple of things. What the hell are they so angry about? When they had control of both the House, the Senate, and the White House, they did nothing with it. They did not, all of this, we're going to change, we're going to put in these policies. It didn't happen. Yet and still, the American people sit back and they look at this and they're like, let's do it again. Let's put the same people. You listen to Miller, you listen to Bannon, and the American people are saying, yeah, give me more of that. Because right now, Donald Trump and Joe Biden are tied, or Trump is slightly ahead, because people are paying, what, $1 more for gas. So this, how do you break this? How do you get people to understand what this means for the criminal justice system, what it means under the rule of law, what it means when a president, a former president running for office again, wants to throw people in jail? Because it's not just going to be the people they see on television. This will extend to everybody else downstream and around the country.
Michael, my well-suited friend, I have to say that we have to take a step back, and I'm glad you framed that question the way that you did, because Republicans have shown that they want to have the authority of a room of tyrants, but they want to have the accountability of a room of toddlers. And what I mean by that is, if you remember, during midterm elections, I said that Republicans were politicizing the issue of crime and justice in America. And people got mad at me for saying it. I said it was politicized and it was racialized. And we have seen that play out on the national scale, particularly in the wake of Donald Trump's conviction here in New York. We cannot enter into a space any further where we are allowing the justice system, which is supposed to be fair, balanced, and equal, to be used as a political weapon. And that's ultimately what Republicans are seeking to do. They realize that when it does speak toward the notion of accountability, there is a possibility that their leading candidate is going to be put in jail or at least held accountable under the rule of law. And so what do they want to do? Not only do they want to change the rules, but they also want to seek to essentially have him use it as a weapon and have that party do the same. And that is deeply troubling for all of us who understand what the separations of power are supposed to be and what the true purpose of our criminal justice system should be.
I mean, we will talk on the other side about specifically Alvin Bragg and how they are trying to put that, what you are saying, into action. And stick around. Charles, Anna, they're not going anywhere. We have more to discuss with you in just a moment. But first, we have some breaking news just in the last few minutes in Paris. We did get some video of President Biden and French President Emmanuel Macron during their bilateral meeting. Now, according to the pool report from the reporters who were there with the two world leaders, they were seated across from one another in a garden. This was billed as a coffee, but there was actually no coffee on the table. President Biden was talking, but his voice was too low to hear what he was saying. The only snippet heard by the radio pooler, Tamara Keith from NPR, was Biden saying, quote, "my last conversation with Xi," referring to President Xi of China. But that's all the pool reporters could hear. We are still expecting to hear formal remarks from both of these world leaders this morning. President Biden is wrapping up his consequential visit to Europe this morning. In the next hour, he is expected to visit an American military cemetery that's near Paris. This event caps a week of ceremonies commemorating the 80th anniversary of the Allied invasion of Normandy. The president has used the stage to call for everyday citizens to defend democracy against authoritarianism worldwide.
We stand at an inflection point in history. The decisions we make now will determine the course of our future for decades to come. We have a lot of opportunity, but a lot of responsibility. And it gives me hope to know France and the United States stand together now and always. May we continue to seek democracy, may we in both our languages, and may we always stay together.
Joining us now is Professor of History and author of Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, and Presidential Historian and Professor of History at Rice University, Douglas Brinkley. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Ruth, I want to start with you because I thought this week was an incredibly important week, a definitional week, if you will, on both the global stage and here at home for President Biden, in which he really connected a number of dots about the urgency of this moment. And the Washington Post, Dana Milbank, wrote a piece which I thought sort of captured it. He talks about the question of, will Americans recognize their country in the dark and desperate portrait Trump painted? Or are our countries falling to pieces, he said, and if he isn't returned to power, the country is finished. You won't have a country anymore. Or will Americans instead choose to see a nation still striving to fulfill the higher purpose that Biden described, in memory of those who fought here, died here, literally saved the world here? Let us be worthy of their sacrifice. That, to me, was just a consummating moment. I would love to get your take on how the president has framed this visit around this idea of there's a bigger fight out there. Those who've come before have engaged in it. Now it's up to us to really engage as well on behalf of democracy.
I think it's been extremely effective to frame this, not only because the reason he's there is commemorating, an important victory over fascism in World War II, but it reminds us of the toll that bad leadership can have, and not just on one's own country, but on the world. When you have destructive, dysfunctional, vengeful leaders with large armies, as you did with Mussolini, with Hitler, and today with Putin, you see that the world is not safer. Trump is trying to tell us that the world will be safer if he's there because he's allied with people like Putin and Xi, but that's not the case, and history is very clear on that.
Douglas, I want to agree with Michael that this week was, in his word, definitional, right? And I thought when you were listening to President Biden abroad that he was both expressing the urgency of this moment that we find ourselves in, but with an eye toward history. There were many rhetorical flourishes where he would say, how will we be remembered? How will this moment be remembered in 10, 20, 30 years? Do you agree that this week was definitional? And when we look back, when scholars of history look back at this moment, how will this week and this trip be remembered?
Well, on the short term, it was a big win for Joe Biden. I mean, he went to Pointe du Hoc, the famous spot where Ronald Reagan gave one of his greatest speeches, and pulled off a very important speech, warning us about the need for democracy and the need to fight for freedom, reminding us that authoritarianism is on the loose yet again, really going after, and, mild language in some ways, but going after people that are xenophobic, nativists. There is a right-wing populist movement blooming in Europe right now. So Biden did come across as representing America as a statesman and promoting NATO and protecting the Ukraine and really trying to create a stronger bulwark against Putin's Russia, who's on an expansionary tear right now.
To follow up on that point, Douglas, I believe it was Cass Mudd that once wrote that populism is a thick ideology that's always mixed with a thin ideology. And so this right-wing populism that is on the rise in Europe, populism doesn't always have to be bad. But I would argue like Bernie Sanders is an economic populist, right? But this idea that this dirty populism, for lack of a better term, is the thing that is taking hold in places, not just across Europe, but there's a sentiment like that right here at home. How does that dovetail with what we know to be true about our history?
Well, you see the Republican Party of today going back to the 1930s and embracing a isolationist plank. They are the Henry Fords and Charles Lindberghs of today. This is usually a fringe movement, but isolationism certainly over the decades has had its adherents. What's scary about it, what's worrying about it, is this friendship that President Trump has maintained with Putin. I mean, he acts like, he's Putin's puppet, as Hillary Clinton famously put it. And he acts that way with any authoritarian leader. If you chisel away at what Donald Trump is arguing, he really sees a world of 5 big powers with 5 important authoritarian / in his case, democratic leader. And we don't do business that way in the United States. Trump is standing out as a lone silo because all the other presidents, I mean, Ronald Reagan was in the news because of the spot Biden chose to give his Normandy commemorative speech. Reagan's part of the other president's club, meaning Ronald Reagan would want to make sure that we defended Ukraine. That whole speech Reagan gave in 1984 was about liberating Eastern Europe and getting the Berlin Wall to come down and breaking up the Soviet Union and America democracy on an offensive posture. And Trump is really simply an agent of fear. He's fear-mongering the way Huey Long did in America or Father Coughlin. You get the Joe McCarthy famously. What's different is we've had those tenets before of fear-mongering writ large, but they never went all the way to somebody being able to take over the party of Abraham Lincoln. And also with the specter that January 6th has happened, and this many millions of Americans seem to shrug off January 6th as not a big deal, to me is frightening, and it tells you just how deeply rooted social media has made right-wing extremism a disease across our land right now.
So Ruth, given everything that we know, and certainly that we've learned from history and historians like Douglas, how did we get here? How do people move themselves into this space? Because the reason I ask is I want to play for you the new ad from the Biden campaign, which lays out some of the more infamous quotes of Donald Trump and military service, for example. Let's take a look.
He handed me his Purple Heart. I always wanted to get the Purple Heart. This was much easier.
Does Donald Trump even understand why someone is given a Purple Heart, why they receive a Purple Heart in the first place? And so here we are in this moment where people are looking past the guy's attack, this man's attack on the military, his attack on institutions, his attack on the Constitution. What do you sense is going on that's animating this and allowing it to continue the way it has?
I'm really glad that the Biden campaign made that ad. It's very moving because it speaks to the heart. It gets to the heart of the fact that authoritarians are nihilists. They have no ideals beyond money and power. And they can't, anybody who would do something like serve their country knowing they may be injured or killed, that makes them losers and dupes, which are and suckers, which are the words that Donald Trump uses about our own people who serve. And he mocks people who serve, such as Nikki Haley's husband. But this is in keeping with authoritarians throughout history, because they really despise the people they, quote, govern. And they only want to dominate them, exploit them. And so this is why I go back to character and leadership. And having somebody like Donald Trump lead our country, we deserve better.
It is an incredible moment, Douglas, to be living in, right? And I think about President Biden on the world stage. Yesterday, we were on air. We came on air. We were prepared to talk about the president's trip to Europe. In the interim, there was the hostage rescue out of Gaza. I want you to take a listen to what the president had to say.
I want to echo President Macron's comments welcoming the safe rescue of 4 hostages that were returned to their families in Israel. We won't stop working until all the hostages come home and a ceasefire is reached. That is essential to happen.
I'll tell Douglas, so often when I see these moments on the world stage, I'm reminded of the argument that President Biden made when he was running for president 4 years ago, which was, we need someone who day one is ready to hit the ground running, who understands challenges at home and challenges abroad. He really foreshadowed the years that would come in terms of the myriad crises that have developed in real time.
Well, when I was watching President Biden these last few days, I'm reminded of his greatness. You know, often we dismiss something that he says or that he seems to be fumble an opportunity, but there's this sort of steady evenness about him, even a low keelness, which may not make him kinetic on the campaign trail, but it sure does make you feel well or at least sane that he is a statesperson, that he understands protocol, that he understands how important the U.S.-French relationship is, that he could go back and talk about Lafayette with Marcon and understand the whole story of the American Revolution up to today with France. He's been there. He's done that. He's seen a lot. And he was visibly moved at Normandy when he went into that forest of crosses and Stars of David and walked across there. You can feel how emotional this was. After all, Biden had been born in World War II in 1941. Probably be our last president coming right now that would be a World War II president. And he reminded us of the power of NATO, that this has been the essential alliance since 1945, really 48 with Harry Truman, all the way up to now. And there's only been one anti-NATO president, and that's Donald Trump. NATO, the Atlantic Alliance, is seminal for keeping our military, economic policies, and democracy, and culture, even shared Atlantic culture, alive and well. And I've been deeply disturbed the way Trump's kind of shunted aside NATO as if it's unimportant, almost acts Trump like the European Union. She might as well just blow away. And so it's refreshing to watch Biden and know that he has that long institutional memory and understands what containment of Soviet expansion means back in the George Kennan, Paul Nitze days way.
President Biden, I think, has been serious about courting independents, even right-leaning independents and anti-Trump Republicans. How do we know? Well, the campaign just hired a national Republican engagement director who, before this role, was chief of staff to former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. This comes as outside groups are also boosting outreach to these voters. Republican voters against Trump has launched a new 6-figure billboard campaign in 4 swing states featuring Republicans who refuse to cast a ballot for the ex-president. Joining us now is senior spokesperson for the Biden-Harris campaign, Kevin Munoz. Kevin, good to see you.
Kevin, good to see you. It's interesting and I think politically exciting to see the Biden campaign engage the way it's starting to, really pushing up against a lot of the narratives. We were talking a little bit earlier in the last few segments about the Biden ads that are really sort of taking Trump's words and just putting them out there and saying, hey, he said this. No, I didn't make it up, right? Mm-hmm. So now you have this shift, this pivot politically on the ground where you're bringing on Republicans who can help. Austin Weatherford is out of the Kinzinger environment. What is the play here? How do you think this shapes up narratively for the Biden campaign? What are you saying to Republicans who I know many of whom are waiting for that invitation to the conversation? They want to see it come correct, though. They want to see it come in a way which is meaningful to reaffirm the coalition, if you will, that Biden needs to win this election.
Well, look, let's just look at the opportunity here. We had 4.5 million Republican primary voters that voted against Donald Trump this November, or back in this year. These are voters that they didn't have to vote in a primary. Donald Trump was very clearly the front runner, but they wanted to show that they had not gotten, Donald Trump does not have their support, and they want somebody that stands for the rule of law, stands for our democracy, stands for, fighting for America on the global stage. These are voters, to your point, though, that they need to hear from the campaign, and we need to earn their vote. So we've been running these 7-figure ads. We've been targeting these voters in the battleground states, and we brought on Austin, who not just from former Congressman Kinzinger's office, but has 2 decades of history. And what we got to focus on is building a bench of trusted Republicans that are willing to be courageous, speak up, and talk to fellow Republicans and say, you can support President Biden. We also think we have a good message, not just because we're not Donald Trump, of course, but because, Joe Biden has a proven history of getting things done, working across the aisle. Look at the bipartisan border plan, the one that Trump killed, of course. So we're going to talk to them about all those issues.
So, Kevin, let's talk about the border, specifically how you have a lot of progressives frustrated and angry with the president over his latest executive action on asylum specifically. I want you to take a listen to what Representative Greg Casar had to say to us yesterday.
The Republicans here in my first term have covered up for every failure of theirs by pointing to some vulnerable group of people. And I think that they've been setting up this trap that, unfortunately, President Biden has been pushed into with this executive order.
Do you agree with that characterization that the president has been pushed into a trap by Republicans? And help me understand the political calculus on this. What you lose in the way of energy and support from progressives, where do you think you are gaining it back?
Well, let's just take a step back. On day one of this administration, Joe Biden brought forth a comprehensive immigration plan. And since day one, Republicans have failed. They have used the border as a talking point. They refuse to come to the table and work with us. And even despite that, Joe Biden was able to negotiate a bipartisan border plan that would have provided long overdue resources to help secure our border, provide more resources for immigration courts, to help expedite green cards for a lot of these people that need more pathways to citizenship. And what happened? Donald Trump killed it. He killed it not once, but he killed it twice. And so we are in this position where we were forced to take an executive action that helps address what we can do and what we cannot do with very limited resources. And we have to be honest about that. That does not mean the fight for comprehensive immigration reform is over. You heard Joe Biden talk about it earlier this week, that the fight is far from over. But we do need to be honest about the fact of the matter. The American people, they don't want, they demand action when it comes to a broken immigration system. An overwhelming majority of Americans support this action. They support comprehensive immigration reform. And I think we have to remind voters that we got to work for them.
So, Kevin, before I let my friend Simone jump in, I just want to ask you really quickly as a follow-up there. There's been a lot of reporting about the possibility then of the administration. I understand you were on the campaign side, considering then ways in which they could address challenges in immigration on the interior, including parole in place for spouses of American citizens. Do you think that is something we could see as soon as this coming week?
Well, look, I can't get ahead of any policy announcement, of course, but what I can say is, you heard the president earlier this week, the fight for comprehensive immigration reform, addressing more pathways to citizenship, especially for people that have been in this country for a long time, is critical. And what we know the American people want, they don't want chaos. They don't want chaos at the border, and they do not want chaos in their communities. And so we have to continue that fight. We also have to, as I remind the American people of what Donald Trump is running on. He wants to round up Latinos. He wants to round up immigrants across this country, mass detention camps. So we have to do both.
Kevin, in the time that we have left, I think that a lot of times when folks talk about engaging, we talk a lot about the need for the Biden campaign to engage Republicans, because that is a part of the president's coalition, moderate Republican voters and independents. But then we talk about the need to gin up the base as well and treat base voters like persuadable voters, young people, women, Black voters, Latinos. And what is the campaign's message when it comes to the economy for Black and Latino voters, young people? Because when I'm out there talking to people, one of the chief concerns continues to come back to be economic, things like housing, right? The rent is too damn high right now, all over. And God bless you if you want to buy a house and you're not rich. So what is your message to folks that say, I hear what you're saying about the border, I got it, Trump, xenophobic, understood. What about the economy?
I think we have to, tell a full, comprehensive story to the American people about who is fighting for them and who is fighting to make their lives better. It's not just the economy, but who is taking actions to address things like corporate greed, who is taking actions to address junk fees, who is lowering healthcare costs, who's cutting prescription drug costs for the American people, and really remind folks that this takes time and these efforts to talk about the economy, connect Joe Biden's very popular agenda, an agenda that was very hard to get passed, but Joe Biden got it done, and remind them that not only did he make Washington work, but Donald Trump, he wants to undo all of that progress. He wants to increase healthcare costs. He is having big oil execs write his own executive orders that they max out to his campaign. So we got to do both. We also got to do it by showing up where voters are at. We know they're not watching the news every single day. They're on TikTok.
Well, they're watching the weekend.
They're watching the weekend. But if they're not watching the weekend, we got to talk to them on TikTok.
Yeah.
We got to be on, the tabloid magazines. Even we got to be on podcasts. So that's what we're doing. You've seen the president
just real
do a lot.
quick on that. I know we got to go.
Yeah.
But here's the thing to Simone's point. Kevin, you've got to connect to the why, an understanding that the rent's too high, and B, an understanding of the efforts we're undertaking are going to try to address
Lower the
that.
rent, yeah.
The federal government can't lower your rent, but there are policies it can put in place to make people, put people in a better position. Wage increases, for example, will offset rent increases, things like that. So that connection, I think, has got to be important. I think Simone hits on a very important part of this conversation for the Biden team, that connection of what's happening to me real time. I still don't know if you understand it. And I think they want to hear that you guys understand that.
Absolutely. And I think we have a really good opportunity.
Right.
There is time. Not that much time, but there's time. Kevin Munoz, thank you, my friend. Good to see you. Folks that sought to not just undermine, but unravel key pieces of our democratic institutions now being placed on the committees where America's secrets are held and discussed.
Yeah, Simone, this is a stark contrast, what we're seeing right now with what we're seeing happen on Capitol Hill with the intelligence community, because we've got a president here who understands what it means to have allies who have your back, who you share intelligence with, but more importantly, who you share common values with. Contrast that with a candidate right now who is ordering the Speaker of the House to put on the key committee from where I sit, the House Intelligence Committee, loyalists not to freedom, democracy, and allied relations, but rather to him. And so I'm here to tell you that these two appointees to the Intelligence Committee, Ronny Jackson, Scott Perry, would not qualify for a clearance required to wax the floors at FBI headquarters. They don't even go through a background investigation because they're elected officials, but now they will have access to the most highly classified intelligence in the intel community. As Assistant Director and Head of Counterintel at the FBI, I frequently brief the House Intelligence Committee, and I didn't see Republicans or Democrats on that committee. I saw Americans who, when they were exposed to the threat and risk in the form of classified, simply wanted to help fight the threat. That's gone.
So Frank, you have a couple of things at play here that I find very interesting. One being that the Speaker of the House appointed these two gentlemen without members of his own caucus knowing that this appointment was going to be made. Certainly Republican members of the Intelligence Committee being made aware that these appointments was going to be made. And two, Scott Perry's response to that appointment in a Twitter, in a tweet that he put up. I look forward to providing not only a fresh perspective, but conducting actual oversight, not blind obedience to some facets of our intel community that all too often abuse their powers, resources, and authority to spy on the American people. Well, I just want to say first up, Congressman, that's a load of crock. Because, the people I know in this space and have worked with in the past in this space, that's not the agenda. Frank, you just made the point that you've gone before this committee. What does that say to you that, one, the Speaker didn't even have the appropriate parts to inform his own committee members, Republican members, that this appointment was going to be made, and two, to have someone now serving with that attitude that the intelligence community is about spying on the American people and using resources against American interests?
So I continue to bemoan the erosion, the death by 1,000 cuts of our institutions like CIA, FBI, Department of Justice. and the DNI, because they're turning the American people against the key institutions that actually protect the American people. So if you're secretly fulfilling an agenda of a candidate who's ordering you to appoint a couple of people to the Intel Committee, it begs the question, why? Why would you not put competent, qualified people on the Intelligence Committee? Because they have a secret agenda. And not so secret, as they've just said, they're not going to engage in healthy oversight, which I welcome, but rather they're going to erode the authority of those institutions. And by the way, for example, they also weigh in on budget. So if you think they can't have an impact, they can tell the FBI, you're not working this particular program. We don't want to hear about reporting on Russia. We don't want to hear about foreign connections to domestic terrorism. Stop reporting, stop working those items.
Frank Figliuzzi, I often wonder what you were up to when you were not sitting here with us on national television. I sort of imagine that you were like in your basement tracking the dark web or listening to the police scanner, but it turns out you have instead been writing an excellent book. Tell us what it is about.
Yeah, real quick, Long Haul: Hunting the Highway Serial Killers is the true crime account of the FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative. And even though I kind of prided myself on knowing all the corners of the FBI in my career, I did not know all the details of this program, which is 850 murders of women alongside our nation's highways, mostly sex-trafficked women over just the past few decades. 200 of those 850 cases are considered active and unsolved. The FBI says there's 450 active suspects right now. Long-haul truckers who are phenomenal people and are contributing to our economy and are impressive family people are being tainted by the small fraction that are killing women alongside our nation's highways. The challenge here is they'll grab a victim in one jurisdiction, they'll rape or murder her in a second, and they'll dump the body in a third. So I got my investigator hat back on. I went out on the road. I rode over 2,000 miles in a big rig. I rode flatbed to get into three subcultures: long-haul trucking, sex trafficking victims, and the crime analysts who are connecting the dots to stop the killing.
Absolutely incredible. Frank Figliuzzi, thank you so much.
This is great.
Incredible. His new book, it is called Long Haul: Hunting the Highway Serial Killers. It is on shelves now.
During Jim Crow, the black family was together. That's right. During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative, because black people always have been conservative-minded, but more black people voted conservatively. And then H.E.W., Lyndon Johnson, and then you go down that road, and now we are where we are.
I'm sorry.
Indeed, indeed. Your eyes and ears do not betray you, Simone. That was Republican Congressman Byron Donalds of Florida romanticizing the Jim Crow era last week. His remarks met with swift pushback from Democratic leadership, but the congressman says his words were taken out of context. Last night, Donalds joined our colleague, Reverend Al Sharpton, for a debate on the matter. Take a look.
I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. But look, you were born in Brooklyn, you went down into the South, went to Florida State, you have an interracial marriage, you're the congressman of a district that's not a black district. I mean, how can you even live with yourself acting like Jim Crow was a good era or better era for blacks? What happened to you?
Okay, that's real cute. That's real cute. I did not say that, and I'm not going to sit here and have to insinuate that against you, because right now you're lying about what I said. I did say Jim Crow. I did reference it 3 times. That's not to say that it was better. I never said that. Those words never came out of my mouth. When are you going to get that through your skull and everybody else's skull? I never said that.
I just would like to know who he was talking to when he thought that he could speak to Reverend Sharpton like that. I just want to know who he thought he was talking to. But I'm going to sit back and I'm going to cede the ground to the chair.
My question is, I mean, if we play the tape coming in again, he said during Jim Crow, blacks
families were together.
Black families were together. Now
they were.
They were
in subjugation. I mean, like, yes,
because they were segregated.
In oppression.
That's why they were together. Look, brother. All you had to do was, you know what? I don't know why the hell I brought up Jim Crow in that statement. That was my bad. That was not what I was trying to contextualize at the moment. But here I am, and I now have to make it clean and clear it up. Right?
That's what he should have done.
No, you don't. You don't double down on Jim Crow, bro. You just don't. And you can't convince black people or anybody else that we were better off in a segregated society where your behind wouldn't even been allowed in Congress, and certainly would have had some questions about who you socialized with. So look, black folks, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, you just got to keep it real about what we went through. Right? What our parents and our grandparents went through. I grew up in Washington, D.C., which was still segregated. My mama couldn't take me to certain parks in D.C. because of Jim Crow. And yet I sit now where I sit. Despite that, I'm not going to forget that, though, and I'm not going to try to romanticize it and pretend that somehow my mama and I were better off when she couldn't take me to that park. So just stop it. I mean, and especially black Republicans, stop this crap. Just be honest about it. I mean, damn.
I'm curious, Simone, if you thought that message was for black Americans, or you thought that message was actually for white Americans who want a permission structure.
Exactly. Alicia, I'm looking to be like, well, who was the damn message for? And I'm sorry to curse on a Sunday morning, Lord, but it was... I was having a conversation with someone this week about, black engagement, black voters, the diversity of sentiment among the African-American electorate, especially as we talk about like black men, but also black women. You know, black people are not a monolith. No group of people of color are a monolith. And I believe that we need, Republicans. I believe that we need independents. I don't think everybody should be a Democrat or a progressive in this country. I mean, I still tend to think, my father's no longer with us, but I told him once, I was like, I think you're a Republican, and you just telling me you're an independent voter. So my daddy was a 64-year-old black man from Mound Bayou, Mississippi. So that being said, yes, like there's a diversity of sentiments, but I just think people need to be honest about history, about what has happened, about what we know to be true. And when you conflate history and you do not speak the truth in order to twist yourself up into a pretzel to appear more palatable, because that is what Byron Donalds was doing. He was trying to not romanticize, trying to sanitize, trying to whitewash Jim Crow. So his message seemed more palatable for people who not black people, but for everybody else. And I just do not respect people, especially people who know better. We talked about Marco Rubio and Tim Scott, the senators, a couple weeks ago about what they've been saying about the criminal justice system and men of color and so on and so forth. Like, as a black elected official, especially a black man, as Reverend Sharpton said, from Brooklyn, who knows better. He has a responsibility to speak the truth. And, as they like to say, well, I'm not, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And
I think that face says it all.